cried so much that if I don't drink, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to cry anymore. You'll forgive me if kind of during this I take a detour for a minute, but it's amazing to see all of you. I mean, just amazing to know that you love my son. We're so blessed that you're here. It's nice to know that my son touched your life. And I may not know all of you, but to be in David's presence was to be in the presence of someone. And you felt loved and accepted. You felt good in David's presence. What a role model he was. I want you to know that you're all part of our family. And it would be my deepest, most sincere privilege to serve or give or help you. Because that's exactly what David would do. So I don't care if it's a week from now, a month from now, 10 years from now. Call my number, and I will be there for you. I really, really mean that. Call. I really want to give back and to love you. It would be my privilege to do that. David's loss has been by far the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. We've all had our ups and downs. I had cancer, did the whole chemo thing, whatever. That was nothing. There's this ache, and it kind of doesn't go away. So the sleepless nights, the ocean of tears, and son of a gun, it's still there. And so I find myself ping-ponging around with my emotions. And so, David's saved. David's in heaven. He's happy right now. He's not feeling the way I'm feeling. And so I console myself with the fact that he's blessed and he's happy. But for him to be in heaven means he's not here. And because he's not here, I miss him. And so I cry an ocean of tears on the other side of the coin. And so I can't have heads without the tails. And so, son of a gun, and there I am just bawling my head off again, because I'll walk through the house and see a different picture that I haven't seen, and it hits the trigger. It's like if you hurt your hip and you bang it against the table. It's like, ah! Only in this case, it's a song, it's a picture, and then you're losing it again. But David's blessed. David's in heaven. I'll be honest, I'm still in total denial. I looked at the picture yesterday. I can barely look at it and believe that we're here for a service for my son. I can't believe it's my son. We were dirt biking out in the desert, and the call came. And my first reaction was, you've made a mistake. It can't be. It's got to be someone else. There's no way it can be David. On 3 different occasions across 3 different days, I've asked the coroner to double check because I still can't believe it. And it's been 6 weeks, and I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it. And I was trying to figure out why I was having such a hard time coping with this. And I arrived at the conclusion that we were never designed for death in the first place. So death is foreign. It's not the way we were created. It's not what we were designed for. So death is this foreign thing that I was never meant to deal with in the first place. And then, of course, along with death comes the separation. I was never meant to go through that, because if we were never going to die, I was never going to be separated. So this separation from David, it's unbelievable. It is really, really hard. So the first thing I thought of after David passed was, is he saved? And I knew he was. But the amount of pain you're going through is unbelievable. So you can't sleep. Sleep is a gift. It's like if I slept for 2 or 3 hours, I was so grateful. Oh, thank God I slept for 2 or 3 hours. I didn't have to live in that pain. So if you've had a back pain or something, and you could just sleep a little and not be in pain. And so I would ask God every night after David died, please give me a dream and let me know that he's saved. And I never had the dream. But the day that we were going to go out and say goodbye to David, because the coroner impounds the body, so you don't get to see your son for days. And it's not something you want to do. It's along one of the list of 100 things you have to do that are just terrible, terrible things. But you have to walk through it anyway. And so it's the day we're going to go and say goodbye to David. And I'm up that morning at 4 in the morning. And I'm in David's room. And I'm just going through all those pads of papers, the endless list that David made. And I just came across one that was a handwritten calendar. And of the hundreds of pages I had thumbed through and read every word, this handwritten calendar was the single biggest handwritten calendar I'd found. And it was for 7 days, the last week of David's life. And every day there was a line, and it was the day of the week and the day of the month. And that piece of paper is out in the foyer if you haven't already seen it. And it has all of his to-dos on it every day. And of course, Valentine's is the last day. And there's this laundry list of items he wants to do for his girlfriend. And there's, I want to give flowers to Mama. And all these things on this calendar. But on top of every day, the only thing written above the day for every day of the week was the word Bible. At the bottom of the calendar, in kind of a double rectangle, it says, focus on self and Christ. God doesn't always answer every one of our prayers, but I had asked God for that, a sign that he was saved. That was the day I went out to say goodbye to my son. And it's a long day. And when you walk into the room where he is, and you see him from a distance, like from here back to the sound booth, that's it. I'm done. I turn around and I'm bawling. I mean, it is incredibly hard. And I pull myself together and I enter the room that David's in and I make my way up to David. And of all the ocean of tears I've cried, that wasn't one of them. I got over the body, looked down at what was left of my son, looked at his face, and instantly knew, this isn't my son. My son's gone. My son isn't here. This isn't my son. And I didn't try to think that. That was the first thing that came to mind, was this isn't my son. And the next thing that came to my mind was, oh my gosh, this is just the earthly shell. I'm just looking at the shell. And so, of all the tears I've cried, that wasn't one of them. Now, I backed away from that, his earthly shell, and I cried another ocean of tears because I still missed my son, but that wasn't my son. You know, we have all been touched by David, and one of the best things we did was we had Jacob and some of Jacob's friends and David's friends over to the house, and we've had a few campfires and sitting around and just talking and telling stories. And the stories have been just so comforting. I love to hear Matt tell some of these stories. They're so much fun because, of course, I saw David in one light and you guys saw him in another light, you know, and I didn't always want to know all those stories, but now I want to know. And so, of course, one of my absolute favorites that I'll tell you, because I may not all see again, is we're gone on vacation and the boys are home alone in the house. You know how this one goes, right? And so they throw this raging party while we're gone. And we come home and, you know, I'm kind of Columbo. I don't come out with accusations. I act dumb, which isn't hard. And so I come home and I say, has anybody driven the car? No, we haven't driven the car. Well, you know, that's amazing because it's been parked in a different place. And Jacob whacks David, you idiot. And he goes, I gave you explicit instructions when you drove the car. I would love to hear your stories. I'm looking at Dan Arnold right now. My sons did some work for Dan. My sons did a lot of digging for me in the backyard and moving flagstone, if you've been to our house. And just recently, I had David on another project, and in front of all our kids, David goes, "Why does it feel like every time I'm building character, Dad's saving money?" And so there's David and Jacob digging for Dan, and he's got them digging this trench in the back of some home up in PV. And the next thing you know, they're beating the snot out of each other in this person's backyard because evidently somebody wasn't digging quite right or whatever. But just hilarious. And I think Dan walked up to him and said, "Hey, ladies," And so really the stories are so comforting because it just exposes a side of David that I hadn't seen maybe, or I didn't know that story. One of Matt's stories about David chasing him down, because I coached David and Jacob for 20 seasons in hockey. And those were some of my greatest memories with the boys, just if I could relive those days. And Matt was the best guy in the league. So David's job was to follow Matt around. I don't care if Matt goes and stands in the corner. You go stand there with him. And so if Matt came off the ice, David came off the ice. So Matt pops over the boards for his team, skates down along in front of our boards and goes, "Come on, David. Time to come back on the ice because your job is to go where I go, And they did that off the ice. That's why they were best buddies. And it was an unlucky event that changed David's life later in life. And so David had ping-ponged around a little bit from job to job. And he applied at Best Buy, not too far from him, in fact, over at PCH in Hawthorne. And, Best Buy, whatever. He was done applying, and he walks across the street to watch the planes take off at Torrance Airport. They're pretty cool. And so he walks over to South Bay Aviation, which is one of the places that sells gas, flight lessons, and all that there at the airport, and he applies for a job at South Bay Aviation. That changed his life. David was given unbelievable gifts. Unbelievable gifts. And I wasn't always the most patient dad waiting for him to apply these gifts. But once David had found that purpose, he became a laser. I no longer had to say anything. David, I never even knew he did it, enrolled at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Didn't know he'd enrolled. The next thing you know, he's taking classes. Well, remember, David's goal now is to become a pilot. And they don't just hand those slots out at the Air Force or the Air National Guard. That's a 1 in 10,000 or whatever odds. Now, David, remember, has this purpose. So what does David do? Well, if I'm going to be a pilot, I got to stand out from the other 10,000. So we have to get straight A's in every class. I didn't tell him to do that. But that wasn't good enough. We had to get an A on every test, an A on every homework assignment. David became unbelievably driven. And to give you an idea of his gifting, David passed the AP calculus test in high school and never studied. That's how gifted he was. One of his first classes at Embry-Riddle was advanced mathematics with calculus. Like most kids, he procrastinates. And in procrastinating, he had 45 minutes to do an entire week's worth of homework in advanced mathematics with calculus, which he did an entire week in 45 minutes and got an A. That's David's level of gifting. And I could go on and on about that, but my favorite story about that was one night we're at the dinner table, and we've got all the little guys, and David and Jacob are still the little guys, just like I'm Sunsy to my dad. And I'm 53 and I'm still Sunsy. And so the little guys, even though now they're bigger than me, they're the little guys. And so there we are at the table, and I've got Faith, Grace, Sean, David, Jody. We're all together. And we're talking about grades, and David's talking about how he's getting straight A's. And the next thing you know, he goes, if you don't get straight A's, you're not applying yourself. Oh, my God. Faith, Grace, and Sean are like, shut up, you know? And I am sitting there going, oh my gosh, I like this. Hey, David, what'd you say? And he goes, if you don't get straight A's, you're not applying yourself. Now Faith is chiming in, shut up, David, shut up. I am now on board. I'll give you an extra 20 if you say it really loud into the microphone. And David goes, if you don't get straight A's, you're not applying yourself. It was unbelievable because he had become that driven. So off to the Air National Guard he goes, and that is a division of the Air Force. And so he was officially sworn in. Well, in the process of getting sworn in, you take an aptitude test. No offense, but only the military could have an aptitude test out of 99. Not out of 100, it's out of 99. We could have added one more question to make it out of 100. So David scores a 95 out of 99. At which point, the Air National Guard goes, Mr. Catena, you can do whatever you want. We're just really happy to have you. And so, I mean, because a 95 out of 99. And so off to Fresno, they can go. You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want. Well, Fresno is where the F-16s are based out of. And so that's where David wanted to go. And so off to Fresno he went. And so he was in the reserves, waiting to graduate college so that he could actually enter as an officer because he wanted to be a pilot. So he would drive to Fresno once a month. And so he got up there, and of course he wants to stand out. So now what's going to happen is there's classroom time, and they would ask questions, and Dave would know the answer, and David would know the answer. Pretty soon he got tired of raising his hand. And so what would happen is he would kind of keep his hand down and wait to see if anybody else was going to answer the question. Pause, pause, pause. Okay, he knows the answer. Again, he does this. He waits. Pretty soon, he raises his hand for the umpteenth time. The guy goes, is there anyone else who has the freaking answer? So that's all the intellectual part. Well, as everybody in the family can attest, David now wanted to excel at everything, so there's a thing called Warhawk. And that's the set of PT, physical training requirements. And he wanted to not just pass, he wanted to be number one. And so he printed off his Warhawk requirements for David based on his age and gender. Little did we know there was Warhawk requirements for every age and gender. And so pretty soon everybody in the family had their Warhawk requirements. And we're all doing push-ups on the kitchen floor. Unbelievable. So here, Dad, here's your Warhawk requirements. And if you're enjoying yourself, I'll tell you this story. My requirement as an old guy, 53 years old, was 44 push-ups in a minute. So I gutted it out, and I did my 44. Well, he handed little Gracie her requirement. And the requirement for a 15, 16-year-old girl is 47. And Grace goes, I'll never do it, I'll never do it, I can't do 47. But that's not to know Grace. And so she does that Gracie grit. And I don't care how hard or painful it is, we're going to gut out that last 47. At which point she stands up and I go, you realize you just did more than Dad. Well, David did 80 on his first try. And it wasn't because he couldn't do more than 80. He ran out of 60 seconds. That's what kind of shape David was in on his first try. So I must tell you this, and it's important, whatever. I saw one out in the lobby, don't shoot me, but David died in a motorcycle accident. He wouldn't have died if he was in a car. Period, end of discussion. He hit a K-rail, he flew over the K-rail, he fell 30 feet to Ocean Boulevard below. That's what killed David. If he had been in a car, he would have hit the K-rail, seatbelt holds him in place, airbag deploys, car has bumper. David probably just walks away. Pissed that he hurt the car, but walks away. David died, one reason, is because he was on a motorcycle. The margin for error on a motorcycle is so small. 3 days after buying the motorcycle, and I can tell you that I did everything in my power to get him not to buy the motorcycle, And of course, 3 days after buying the motorcycle, he was hit by a car. 3 days. He didn't tell me that. I found it in his room as I was going through everything. 3 months after buying the motorcycle, my son was dead. Drive a car. The other guy can't see you. 3 days after buying it, he had been hit. Everybody's talked about it, and I would have to agree with it, is, David was such an amazing individual, and the price of his passing has been really unbearable. But God can make all things turn out good. David's in heaven. My encouragement is to let David's passing make you better, make me better. I tell you, it's made me reprioritize, rethink through my life, what's important, what is life, what do I want to accomplish with my life. A couple of little things. David was valedictorian of his high school, or of his 8th grade, and so was Jacob. When they gave their little speech, they would point to Grandpa, have Grandpa stand and go, well, there's the brains of the operation. And it's clearly skipped a generation. It's gone from Grandpa to David and Jacob, which is okay with me. At least they're smart, right? David was, he did triathlons. He won a triathlon with virtually no training. He was a 4-year varsity letterman at South High. I think I saw Mr. Takuda here, Brian. That's hard to do when you're a freshman boy, because the seniors are a little bigger, and the way boys' athletics works is you get bigger and stronger as you progress through high school. As a first-year freshman, he hadn't even run and done the training. These guys have all been running for years, 7-8 miles a day. There's a picture in the slideshow. David's a foot shorter than the other older boys, but he lettered varsity as a freshman. I mean, gifted. He took pole vaulting up as a sophomore in high school. The coach didn't know how to teach David to pole vault. David went over the bar backwards all season and finished 5th in the league, going over the bar backwards. Unbelievable. These stories. At the end of David's life, he was going to school, taking 4 classes at Embry-Riddle, and working. He had been working 5 days a week and traveling to Fresno once a month. He was committed. On his trips to Fresno, we would text. He would get up at 5 in the morning to go do stuff with the military. They'd be done at 3 in the afternoon. He'd go back to his room from 3 to 11 p.m., do homework, and then get up at 5 and go back to the military. Such was his focus at that point. At work, he was a telemarketer at Action Marketing. That's a tough job. So he's selling windows and doors over the phone. He loved it. And knowing David with his personality, he excelled at it. He was unbelievable. He became employee of the month within a couple of months in a whole room of people because everybody liked him. He'd get on the phone, make friends, and people buy from people they like, and the next thing you know, David had sold windows and doors. And so he had excelled at work, and he was doing all of this at one time. I had to go to his job, one of those long lists of things you don't want to have to do. I had to go to his cube and take down all the pictures. And after getting home and kind of getting through that one, they sent me an email, and every day David would bound in the house at about 8:45 at night, because that's when he got home from work. And he would talk about how the day went and how good he had done and how blessed he was and how he'd get to take a spin on the money wheel. And the money wheel would have like $5, $10, $15, $20 denominations. Spin the wheel, they count you out the dough right there. Every night he'd come home with this extra money, and he'd be all happy, and he would tell us every night how spinning the wheel was so awesome. So I get this email. Hi, your son had won one more spin. Can you come take it? Whew. Trust me, That was hard. I kept that one. I'm not spending that one. I paper clipped a little note to it that said David's last spin. You know, one time we went to an ice hockey game with the whole team. It was at the Ice Dogs Arena down in Long Beach. The Marines were there with their pull-up bar. David's a little guy. He can't even come close to reaching the pull-up bar. I say, can my son do some pull-ups? And they said, well, if he does 20, he gets the T-shirt. And they're thinking, it ain't happening. David popped up and did 20 pull-ups on that pull-up bar. The T-shirt looked more like a nightgown on him at the time. He kept that T-shirt. I have that T-shirt. Another event that changed David's life, such little things. He took bowling class at El Camino because he had to take an elective. Oh my gosh, bowling for an elective. Typical David, we don't know how to bowl, so we only use 2 fingers. We don't use the thumb. And he threw the ball so hard, it wasn't that he hit the pins got out of the way. It was unbelievable. And so typical David, and the next thing you know, the whole neighborhood, Chad, Matt, Jacob, everybody's bowling. And David's best was 10 strikes in a row. At one point, David was averaging 200. Not, I broke 200. He was averaging 200. If I broke 200 once, I think I'm happy in my life. David's using 2 fingers and averaging 200. I mentioned that David and Jacob did a lot of home projects. They dug a lot of dirt in our backyard. Just a lot of fun. You know, David has passed from this time and age into eternity. He's in a better place. And as I've tried to grapple with this and the reality of eternity, I kind of came up with David got to go to Hawaii. And so he's in Hawaii. And Hawaii's awesome, and he's having the time of his life. I just don't get to go. And so I got to hang out here and do what I'm supposed to do, and then I'll get my ticket, and I'll get to go to Hawaii. I can tell you that as a father, there's things that night I wished I could have held him. I wasn't there at 1 in the morning. I wished I just could have held him. He may have been dying, but to hold him in my arms and tell him it's okay. I love you. It's okay. I love you. It's going to be okay. I love you. I'll be there soon. But he's in Hawaii. I'm going to get to go to Hawaii too. Our whole family's going to get to go to Hawaii. I can't wait. Another thing I thought about is David fell from that ramp 30 feet. I wished I was there to catch him. I don't know that I would have been able to do anything. I mean, I would have sacrificed my life if that's what it took to catch him and break his fall. I wasn't there to catch David, but Christ was there. Christ caught David. You know, time is a gift. Our time, you know, we never called him David. The one word you never heard in our house was David. It was Jojo or Whip Whapper or little guy or whatever, but it was never David. Time is a gift. Our time with David was a gift. He was a blessing. But you know, someday it's going to be over, and our time here will be over. If you have questions about God or about life or about death, get the questions answered. It's an unavoidable fact. And I think one of the things that's been clear through all of this is that it's an unavoidable fact. Sooner or later, I've got to grapple with these questions and these issues. So you may have questions. Ask away. Ask away. What happens after we die? Good question. Tomorrow's Easter. You know, which interestingly enough, right, today's the day before Easter. Christ rose on Easter. My son rose. My son's in a better place. You know, I love that scripture, where death is thy victory. There is none. David rose already. You know, when we came home, I found out on a Saturday, we were 40 miles from camp on a dirt bike. I had to ride 40 miles up and down through the desert just to get to the camp. By the time I had gotten there, it was dark. I couldn't come home that night. I was emotionally done, physically done. I built a big campfire in the desert. And I mourned my son. You know, I had the lights, and if you've been in the desert, all the stars. When we came home the next day, there was already a note and a dozen roses in this card. Mr. Catena, we have never met, but I just wanted to reach out to you with my most sincere apologies to you, Jacob, Faith, Grace, and everyone. I grieve for his loss. I can't imagine what you're all going through. I've always loved your son. There was never a day that went by that he was not on my mind. He made me laugh like no one ever could. I'm just so sorry. My prayers are with you. We all love and miss David. He was and is so special, a divine human being. You know, we've gotten a lot of cards, and I appreciate them. It's hard to read them. I mean, I know that, you know, and I would send one if it was the other way around. They're just hard to read. As I've had to work through David's passing, there's a peace that passes understanding. It doesn't take away the pain, but I know that everything's okay. That's important. It still hurts, but I know that everything's okay. We've all passed, everyone in this room, from our mother's womb into this world. We didn't know what was in this world from inside our mother's womb. David has passed from this world to the next. We have no clue, just like we didn't have any clue when we were in our mother's womb what was out here. We can't see the next world. David has passed from this world to the next. I think, once again, if there was anything that I could do, I would have liked to have just given him a hug. I miss David. Once again, I try to rejoice and be happy that he's blessed. The problem is that on the top of the coin, it's happy David's blessed and he's in heaven. But in order for that to be true, the bottom side of the coin is he's not with me, so I miss him. And so I bounce back and forth between telling myself he's blessed and crying my eyes out. The one thing I do know is that I will be with him again. And someday I will hear the words from Jesus and David, because he's already there. Well done, and welcome home. Welcome home. We are souls together. Another David once said, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. We love you guys. If there's anything we can ever do for you, please ask.